energy management, not time management, is the key to productivity.
Simon's the author of a book called Energize, which is published by Penguin.
When we can understand who we are, what makes us feel alive, what gets us going, the next question is how can we apply that or bring that to the work that we're doing?
You go from a position in your life where you want to make a big change, you want to chase your dreams. But for me, it was like I needed to just breathe, you know? There's no rush.
Post that video, make that call, send that email, take that first step. It's just putting your mind into a place of action. You cannot have self-development without self-awareness.
Hello and welcome back to Rocket Pod. On today's show, we're rejoined by Simon Alexander Ong. We spoke to him a few years ago before the publication of his book Energize, and it's really great to meet him in person and to see where see how far he's come.
If you feel like you're juggling around all the components of your life, from work, family, friends, your own personal time, this episode is packed with a bunch of advice from Simon on how to manage your energy rather than your time.
And what's interesting as well is that Simon and Xander share a Malaysian background.
Yes, and as it happened, we didn't have time to dive into the Eastern versus Western approaches to energy. However, hopefully we can bring him back on for round 3 and dive more into that.
And I had the pleasure to read Simon's book, Energize, that was published by Penguin Random House. And it provides a really good framework on how to manage your energy, guard it, deploy it. So I think this discussion is going to be really helpful for those folks that are maybe not aware of how they're expending their energy. I think it does actually focus a laser on how important your energy is and how to manifest it and how to really enjoy it and use it wisely.
Let's bring him on. Welcome, Simon.
Welcome. Simon, welcome back to Rocket Pod.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah, and I think the last time we left off, I think you were two weeks before the publication of your book Energize. And it seems that things have gone stratospheric since then. Well, certainly, that's it's just incredible what's happened since then. And just for those listeners that are unaware of Simon's book, so Simon's the author of a book called Energize, which is published by Penguin. And it's all about, in fact, perhaps you can actually explain, there is the book. So do you want to, in a nutshell, could you just tell our listeners that aren't aware of your work, what Energize is about?
Absolutely. Put simply, Energize is pointing to the fact that energy management, not time management, is the key to productivity. And that energy consists of more than just your physical energy. It is your mental, emotional, and spiritual energy.
Amazing.
It's a kind of a holistic approach to energy.
Absolutely. And
actually, I'm in the last final. It's been a wonderful book. Actually, I picked it. I actually started reading it in India a couple of weeks ago. And it goes through how you can become more mindful, how do you get more energy, whether it's physical or mental or just be more in touch with your spiritual side, and then I guess once you have the energy, how do you manage it, how do you deploy that energy? And I think a few things kind of resonated with me. If you can be fully self-aware and if you show up in the present moment with your family or your friends, it's almost like what you put out, it comes back in spades. Not that you do it to get something back, but it's amazing what difference it makes when you show up with full energy. I don't know whether you can comment about.
It's so powerful. I mean, first, when I think about energy and time, just to, I guess, share a bit more with the listeners, is when you are time rich, but energy poor, you are going to waste that time. You're going to procrastinate, and you end up in this cycle of wanting more time but wasting time you already have. And there's always something to do that never gets done. But if you're time poor and energy rich, you get more done in the days and weeks than most do in months and years. And this is why energy is so important. And when it comes to work and showing up, we all feel it. When somebody cooks you a nice meal and they've put their passion and their love and their energy into it, you can feel it. You can feel it when you taste that food versus somebody who's doing it just because they have to do it. And so the plate might feel rushed. It doesn't feel like there's much love into it. They've just done it because they had to do it. And that's how we feel energy. You can't explain it in words, but you can feel it.
Definitely.
Maya Angelou once said that people will forget what you did, they will forget what you said, but they will never forget the way you made them feel. And that is all about an energy exchange. And so that's why in the book I describe energy as like this universal language that has no words, yet you and I can feel it and know what it is telling us. And that's why for me it is so important.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to share my mum's fried rice is called Mama's Love.
Uh-huh.
And it's known obviously with like our friends and family friends, and nobody can replicate. You have the ingredients and you have used the exact same stuff, but it's not Mama's Love unless Mama makes it, you know? So yeah, I mean, I kind of want to get into that, dive into it a little bit more. It's sort of like approaching a situation with the right energy and the right vibration. It drastically affects the outcome. Do you want to speak to that a little bit and how we can start to become aware of that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think there's two pieces to the question. So you've got the awareness part, and then you've got the energy and how we show up and engage. So with awareness, you cannot have self-development without self-awareness. And that's because you can't change what you're not aware of. And any change in our lives, personal or professional, begins with knowing where we are, where we want to be, and what has to improve. Now, if you don't know any of those things, then you will go forward quite aimless. But once you've got awareness as to, okay, what is my current situation? Do I like my current situation? If not, what must change? What do I want to get out of my path, whether that's in my career, my relationships, my health, and so on? What are the obstacles ahead of me? And what must I do to upskill or give me the tools needed to overcome whatever the world throws my way? So now that kind of gives you a macro overview of the land ahead. That's the awareness piece. With the energy side, it is when you show up in the world, whether it's the work you do, the conversations you have, are you showing up in a way where people can feel what you're about? Now, for most of us, when we show up and we get into a conversation, we're not present. We are living either in the past or the future. So, for example, if someone goes to a networking event and they're thinking about introducing themselves and having a conversation with someone, often they're living in the future saying, what will he or she say?
Yeah.
Well, I'd be able to add value to that conversation. What if they don't like what I have to say? Or they're living in the past thinking, oh, this is going to be another one of those events. There's not going to be many opportunities. Is this really a good use of my time? So what's happening is they're neither living in the future or the past. They're just living in this place where they're feeling lost, and no one really gets a sense of their energy. But if we're living in the present moment, what we're focused on is what we can do now. What can I do right now? And that's why I believe that the greatest gift we can give others is this feeling that I have been listened to, appreciated, and supported. Now, this applies to whether you are in a company. If you're leading a team of employees, if you can give people that feeling, your business will flourish because people feel valued. They feel like they've been listened to. And that's why people don't want your time as much as they want your energy and presence. So what I've found is that when I've gone into conversations, not attached to the future, not attached to thoughts of the past, but just coming from a place of curiosity.
Right.
Tell me about the work you do.
Right.
And then they speak, I then engage, but I just come from that place of present curiosity. And then what I find is that when you are coming from a place of presence, your mind is focused on the now. So I'm always looking for opportunities because my mind isn't stuck in the past or future. It's looking at the present moment. Who can I speak with? What value can I add? So I'm always thinking about ways of engagement, but also how do I give people that gift of saying, I'm coming from a place of curiosity. I want to learn. And I'm giving you my energy right now.
I love that. I love that. I think for me, when I first started that journey, a huge part was just shutting up and just listen. Because when I wanted to dive in and say stuff, I realized that's me not living in the present. That's me wanting to just like.
And I think this is how we build influence and effective relationships. I mean, first thing, going back to what you said, is people love talking about themselves.
Yeah.
You know, if we give people the space, they speak into that. And what we don't appreciate is that when people speak into that, that's them giving us information about their lives, their challenges, their hopes, and their dreams. that gives us information to see how we can add value
Mm.
and how we can continue the conversation. So if somebody then told me that they had this dream or something they wanted to manifest, but these are the challenges they have coming up, and that they're finding it difficult to balance certain things in their life, well, that to me is a spark, because then I think, well, the work I do could be very helpful to them. So I just then respond, and I might say, well, would a conversation together around those obstacles be helpful
Mm.
if it was instrumental in helping you get closer to manifesting that dream?
Mm.
Now, what's happening is I'm listening, listening, and listening for ways I can help, ways I can serve.
Mm.
And I think that's where influence and relationships can be very powerful,
Mm.
because then people see you as someone of value,
Right.
someone that they want to be around,
Right.
because you're someone that can be very helpful to their own path in life.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that just kind of sparked, and I think I picked it up from your book,
Mm.
you talk about the beginner's mind. And if you kind of put yourself in the present moment
Yeah.
when you're engaging with another human being, it's almost like if you can actually have that beginner's mind where you're actively listening to what they have to say.
Mm.
And with that, I think you talk about wonder and love, and then your knowledge maybe expanding, or that
Yeah.
connection, different connections are made, and then that gives energy. So it brings a whole different vibration to the conversation, and people react differently.
Mm.
Another thing that you talk a lot about is, a lot of people, and I guess a lot of about society we live
Yeah.
in the West, and in fact all around the world, is that quite often people are running somebody else's race, and they're living to somebody else's what success looks like for somebody
Yeah.
else, or for what society perceives success. And you talk about that quite a lot in your book.
Mm.
And it's almost like defining your own success. I know I'm kind of going off a bit
Yeah.
tangent here, but defining your own success. But the only way you can really do that is if you're really self-aware, and that could be a journey in of itself to actually figure out how
Yeah.
you define success. And you certainly were bold, and you left the corporate life. And I know that so Rocket Pod did speak to Simon, back
Yeah.
before the book, as we touched on, and we talked a lot about Simon's personal journey from the corporate job to entrepreneurship. Can you touch a little bit about those two things? So that beginner's
Yeah.
mind piece, and then the self-defining what success is
Sure.
right for you.
So I'll start with the second, then I'll come back to the to the first one.
Yeah.
So this is why the longest journey we make as humans are the inches from our heads to our hearts, because so often we suppress our inner wisdom, we suppress our desires because we feel we have to conform. And whether that's conforming to our family expectations, our community's expectations, or what we think is success in the eyes of society, which is very easy to fall into the trap of, because from a very young age, when you go to school, you are taught that there are certain paths that we have to follow to become successful. And the people we look up to from a young age tend to be those who have status, they have money, they have material possessions. So if somebody has a beautiful house that you see on social media, or somebody is enjoying a glamorous life in the magazines and papers you read, or is earning millions of dollars, then to most of us, we see those things as the definition of success. But what we don't see is what goes on behind that. We can only ever see what is shared in the media, what is shared on social media. But what we don't see is the sacrifices, is the journey that every individual has been on. And so this awareness piece of knowing what does success mean to me is actually one of the most powerful exercises that we can do to get clear. And it goes back to, in answering sort of the first part, clarity is power. If you have no idea what is important to you, what your legacy is going to be about, and the value that you can bring to the world, then it's going to be very easy to be distracted by shiny objects. And then you end up saying yes to everything, in the hope that it will lead you to where you want to be. But if you don't know where you want to be, you're going to end up being burnt out. And so it took me a while, and I thank the financial crisis for this. I think if the financial crisis never happened, maybe I wouldn't be doing the work I am doing today, or maybe if I did, it would have taken a lot longer. But the financial crisis gave me that opportunity to go inward and really ask myself, what was success for me? Is this something I want to do 20, 30, 40 years from now? And the answer was no. I mean, yes, a career in the financial industry paid well, but I dreaded it. I got to Sunday nights and there was this tension in my stomach ahead of Monday morning. And I was living 5 out of 7 days looking forward to 2 days.
Yeah.
And that was not a life I wanted to continue living. I just didn't want to live this life where the only thing I looked forward to were the weekends and vacation. I mean, it was hell, and I was just dreaming of what this other life would look like. And so curiosity got the better of me, and I just decided to look outside of my bubble. I think too many of us stay within our bubbles. And it was when I looked outside, I said, okay, what have I got to do in order to see what I maybe would like to do long term? Because at that point I didn't know. I mean, my knowledge was only limited to finance. So I changed my environment. I read different books. I went to seminars. I watched videos. I tried to soak in as much as I could. I became this learning machine. And this kind of leads to this beginner's mind as well, is that I started to embrace this eternal student mindset. And I realized that when you embrace this sort of learning machine mindset, you opened your world to billions of teachers. Now, what I mean by this is every conversation, every interaction has the power to teach you something. Doesn't matter where someone is. They could be at the top of the game. They could be finding themselves. They could be at the bottom of the ladder. Every conversation, interaction, if you are humble enough, has lessons to teach you.
Right.
And that's the benefit for me of really embracing this beginner mind. And to fully embrace it, you have to have humility. You know, if you have ego, what is going to happen is you're going to ignore certain groups of people because you think they have no value. But if you're coming from a place of humility, you're saying to yourself, anybody can teach me something, and I'm open to that. So to really embrace that, you've got to have a level of humility to know that teachers could come from anywhere, and anybody in the population could be just the teacher I need.
Yeah, and it's showing up with that energy and that active listen, you know, actually really listen and being in that present moment, because you can miss it. I mean, you could be, talk about the ego thing about people you might not want to speak to, but if you're in your head and you're thinking about the next thing, if you think about yourself and not about them necessarily, you might miss something. You might miss a gold nugget or something that could actually spark. In fact, Xander recently, he recommended the Celestine Prophecy to me.
Oh, the Celestine Prophecy.
I don't know whether are you familiar with that book? It's basically about, in fact, do you want to give it a little, just
It's a novel. It just talks about, there's like what they call transcripts, and it just teaches you about that whole process of awareness, and then understanding how we've collectively come to where we are now over the last millennia and stuff like that, and then basically like where it's going to go, but in a nice novel form, so you can follow it along nice and easily. But I usually it gets passed on. So this is you're now finding out about it, and it's going to come into your space.
Yeah, it's someone's spiritual journey, but I guess one key point is that every person along the way is not, you know, it's meant to be, and it's just knowing, you know, when you meet a new person, so what is, you know, why am I speaking to this person, and how can, you know, how can we join the dots, and then it just kind of keeps growing. It's kind of interesting.
And that's the beautiful thing, is that I'm a big believer of that we never meet people by accident. That we're always meant to meet people for a reason. We just won't know what that reason is at the time.
You're going to love this book.
Yeah, we can only look back in hindsight and join the dots and say, this is exactly why I had to meet that person at the time. And that has happened to me so often. You know, when I look back, and I've had, as I'm sure many of us have gone through, a litany of failures, whether it's failure in work, in personal life, or even periods of grief and pain. And at the time, it's very difficult to see that there is any positive. That why did this person say this, or why did this happen to me? Why did this happen at the time? But as we mature, as we get deeper self-awareness, we realize in hindsight, that is exactly what happened for a reason. And the person I met because of this, or the thing I was introduced to because of this event, or the insight I experienced because of this, has allowed me to then do X, Y, and Z. It is actually from your failures and your setbacks that teach you the most, not your successes. Because successes, I mean, what do they teach you? I mean, yes, it went well, but there's not much more data beyond that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've made mistakes and you've gone through failures, you've gone through periods of pain and grief, they have an abundance of lessons and insights that if we are able to listen to them, we can then apply that into our life and come back stronger.
Have you read Thinking in Bets? Forget the author, but she won the I think World Poker Series like 5 times. Have you read that book?
No,
familiar with
I've got to add it to my list as well.
Yeah, the reason I think about it is it makes the point that you can actually make the right decision and fail.
Yeah.
You can make the wrong decision and succeed. So I know obviously we learn through our failures, but it just puts another kind of flips on its head to say, actually, just because you're successful, you could have just got lucky.
Absolutely. And it's funny because
it's just another take on that.
Yes, as soon as you said the title "Thinking in Bets," it got me thinking, because I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and we were talking about this idea of placing bets. And that we were saying, when we work with clients or we have observations about society as a whole, is that the reason a lot of people desire success but they don't get it is because they're not placing enough bets. And you've got to be placing bets every single week. Now, we're not talking about big
just
bets,
little risks, small risks,
outrageous bets, but small calculated bets. That it's like, when you go to invest your money, people always say have a diversified portfolio,
Right.
which is the same as saying have a few small bets in different places. Because if you put all your money into one big bet and it tanks, I mean, that's your money gone. But if you have diversified bets, well, you're not attached to any single one, because if one fails, you still got your options open.
And if one sticks, one sticks, to put a bit more energy into it.
Exactly. It gives you that insight.
Yeah, because I actually I had this conversation with Eddie Jones, and I actually recommended the book, and actually he'd read it, but I saw him the next day he'd already consumed it. But it would talk about, you could make a certain decision on a play and it could go wrong, but actually statistically that could have been the right decision. But it's much harder to unpick the successes because you've succeeded. So you can get a bit too overconfident.
And that's the thing when we think about it, just like, post that video, make that call, send that email, take that first step. It's just putting your mind into a place of action, and then detaching yourself from the outcome. Just put things into action. Idea comes ahead, put it into action. Insight comes, put it into action. Just put these small bets out there, because we have no idea ahead of time which one of those bets or seeds that we plant ends up blossoming into an orchard. We have no idea. And it's like with content on social media, I don't know if you found this as well. I could spend a couple of days editing a beautiful piece. I put it out on social media, it does okay. And then there's another bit of content I spend literally 15 minutes editing. It's very basic editing. I put it out, bam, it gets 3-4 times the engagement. I could not have predicted that. My assumption would have said the one I spent more time editing and looked nicer and prettier would have done better. But in fact, the one that was raw and that was a lot more basic in terms of editing did far better on the metrics.
The way I see that is, the more time you spend like editing, doing that, you're putting lack energy into it. Whereas when you don't, you just like, okay, and let it go. There's not much lack energy in it. There's so many things that we can do. We're dancing around a lot of things that many people can do. We can all do this stuff, right? But I think something that's really helped me is the slowing down piece. Because of how, like, okay, you go from a position in your life where you want to make a big change, you want to chase your dreams, but then you start listening to personal development people and they're like, okay, do this and you can do this and do this, blah blah, all helpful. But for me, it was like I needed to just breathe. There's no rush. And I think that's what got me, even just the breathing part, but it's what got me from my head to my heart to just like come down here and not overthink so much. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
I think simply put, what that's alluding to is the fact that you can only give energy when you've got energy. And if you're constantly adding, what you're doing is you're suppressing your energy, you're killing your energy. And you are going to burn out. And that's why for me, when I see productivity is less about adding more, and it is more about taking away and eliminating things from your schedule. So first you have the time to breathe, and second you have the oxygen for what matters most. And it's this process of elimination. We don't talk about that enough. We always talk about the things we should be doing. We should be doing this. We should be adding this to our schedule. We need to embrace this habit. We need to do this little hack in our week. But if you already have a packed schedule, I mean, where are you going to fit it in?
Right.
So you've got to make space first, and that's why for me, when I work with new clients, when I talk to leaders who feel that they're already overwhelmed, I don't start by saying, here's what you should add and here's what you should do differently. I first say, here, let's sit down and look at what we can cut. Let's look at your schedule. Let's look at your diary. Are the things you are doing really important for helping you get to where you want to be? And it goes back to this idea of clarity is power, because if you have no clarity on where you want to go, you won't have an idea of what to say yes and no to. But the clearer you are on who and where you want to be, it becomes easy to say, yes, this is going to help me, and no, this actually isn't going to help me progress forward. This is a nice to do, but it's not a hell yes. It's not a yes, this is absolutely something I want to do. This is what's going to give me energy. This is what's going to allow me to get closer to where I want to be. And so you can cut that out and just make space for spending time with yourself. I call that me time, but also planning and strategizing for the things that are really going to move the needle.
One thing that anyone can do, again, that it's sort of something to do, but also it helps you to clarify all these things, all these thoughts, is like journaling. I know there's a quote that you really liked from
I think it was Diane Chow.
Diana.
Is it something like
so writing is humanity distilled into ink.
That's right.
And it's a quote from a friend of mine, Diana Chow. She did a TED talk in the US, and she built her global business around that idea. And she discovered the power of journaling through her own personal journey, which I share in the book. And she got to this point where she couldn't share what she was going through with anybody close to her, because they were the ones that were creating this toxic environment. So how can you share when the people around you and who are closest to you are also the most toxic people? So she came to this idea of writing. She said, well, if I can write a letter to a stranger, an imaginary stranger. So she would say, I'd be walking home from school and I would see someone in the street, someone in the coffee shop, and I would store that avatar in my head and imagine writing a letter to that person. And I would imagine giving advice to someone and say, to a stranger from a stranger. And then I would just imagine writing all my thoughts into this paper as if I was advising someone else. And what she discovered is that not only was this a very powerful way of taking what was in here and downloading onto paper, which actually helped her mind to be clearer, but it was beautiful in the sense that it taught her that we find it so much easier to give advice to others than it is to take our own advice. And so when she was able to do that, it was a nice way to build her self-awareness of what she had to do, of what she had to overcome in order to find a better life. And then she encouraged people in her school to join in. So if they were going through a difficult time in their life, how could they distill that into writing as if they had to write that to someone else who was going through what they're going through? And that really took off, and she found that so powerful, and it resonated with what I do. I mean, I journal a lot. I have lots of books in my study of journaling I've done over the years. And the thing is, there's no right way to journal. Often we seek this perfect way to do something, which I think is overthinking, and it's actually procrastination than preparation. Whereas to do anything, it's just about starting. Now, it may just begin with a prompt. You can easily go into Google and say, hey, what are the best prompts for journaling? And that can be what gets you started. And then over time, as you journal, you might find your own style. It might just be a question of downloading what is on my head, just putting down thoughts that you're having. But this activity for me can be life-changing because it is like having therapy for free. You don't have to pay a lot of money to go and see a therapist.
It is free.
When you write your thoughts down onto paper, you're forced to confront what's going on in here. But if you don't write them down, what happens is your brain ends up thinking about your thinking about your thinking about your thinking, and you get into a place where you're tied up in knots,
Yep.
and your emotional well-being is tied to events that may or may not even happen.
Yep.
You end up catastrophizing
Yep.
future scenarios, and that's what ends up creating internal stress. But what happens when you download them onto paper, you're forced to evaluate those thoughts.
Right.
You're forced to try and understand those thoughts. So if I write down a thought of, say, I'm not feeling particularly happy today, then the next line, I'm forced to understand why. So what are the things I'm not happy about? And then the brain is reading what you've written down, and it's helping you to clarify those thoughts, to see what the step forward is. And it's like you're having a conversation through the act of pen coming onto paper. You're having a conversation with your true self. It's your mind talking to your heart. Again, goes back to this idea of the longest journey being that between our heads and our hearts. Writing is a way to connect the two. You're downloading thoughts into paper, and then it's connecting you to your heart. So what must happen? And then you just continue writing. And this is why it's therapy, and it's for free.
Yeah, it's a really nice first step to facing, like putting light onto the darkness, you know, which a lot of people just have. That's the struggle for everyone. I think we can all admit that that's where we all started, right? Like, and it's almost like you have to kind of go through that process, unless it's been taught to you from a young age. You kind of have to go through it yourself, and it's not easy. But there's a power in that. There's a real, like, you know, there's a power.
And this is why I think that these skills should be taught at an earlier age. We're moving now to, I think, an age where a lot of the subjects we're taught at school are very quickly going to become irrelevant, because if AI can do the subject you're being taught, if you can go onto Google and get an answer within seconds, I mean, what is the point of memorizing facts or learning something that can either be outsourced or never used in the job that you go on to do? For me, life skills will become far more important. Life skills such as awareness, mindfulness, presentation, communication, interaction, conflict management, all of these things are human skills. But yet what happens is we go through the formal education system, and then we're thrust into the world of work. And for some reason, we're expected to know how to communicate, pitch ourselves, manage conflicts at work, lead a team. None of this stuff is taught.
It's absolutely true.
And yet we're expected to know them when we go into the world of work. And when we don't satisfy or meet the expectation of that, we're fired. You couldn't manage the team well. You didn't get on well with the superiors. Did anybody teach us these skills? I mean, if I'm not even aware of what I'm doing, how am I expected to know what I'm supposed to do here?
It's really funny. So my wife and I were talking. My wife's American, and she's a little bit shocked about how the UK system is. Like, so our youngest daughter is 16. She's doing her GCSEs, and she has 9 subjects or so, and it's 100% exam pretty much for all of them. There's a couple that have some coursework, dance and that type of thing, but it's based on, you know, what you can retain. And a lot of it isn't relevant at all. And we actually, when we had Daniel Priestley on, we talked about, you know, exactly what we're discussing here is that, you know, the education system's a bit broken, and you know, I think even entrepreneurship and that self-awareness, whatever it is, these different tools that can actually help you, practical skills in life. I mean, sure, there's a place in education, but there's lots of skills that, you know, and what if you don't have a photographic memory? You know, you're going to suffer. There's other qualities.
Absolutely.
You know,
and I think it's even more relevant today, because if you're going to school and you are seeing someone half your age who is making millions of dollars a year on YouTube, wouldn't you start questioning the value of what you're being taught? If this person is already building a business and they're only 6 years old. Because I think with the growth of the internet, the evolution of technology, it's allowing us all to have a level playing field. You know, no matter your age, no matter your experience, no matter where you're located, if you have access to the internet and you can use the platforms available and you know how to use them, you can make a lot of money. You can construct your own lifestyle. You can build a business around your passions and your hobbies. And so for me, I think what becomes more relevant is less having to pass exams and meet certain grades to get to the next part of your formal education, and more understanding, well, how do I use technology in an effective way, number one. Number two, how do I build things? So whether that's build a business, create a website, shoot content, all of this stuff. So basically this is the creation side of things. And number three, how do I market, sell, and communicate? Now, for me, those become very important skills as you grow, because if you know how to build things, if you know how to sell and market, and if you can understand technology very quickly, whether that's coding or whether that's how to use applications, I mean, you become unstoppable. So for me, these three areas become even more relevant in today's world.
Yeah. And actually, you touched on your book. Larry Page went to Montessori school.
Yeah.
And actually, Anna, my youngest, went to Montessori school when she was small, because she's very creative, and she's a real free spirit. And what I liked about the Montessori system is that, you know, the students gravitate to things that they actually have an interest in.
Yeah.
And they bring that energy to that subject. And then obviously that human connectivity, as far as the peers, the older kids, they can all learn off each other. And it's almost like, you know, what we're not good at, we're probably never going to be the best at it, but we can be, you know, the number one in the world at something that we actually have an interest in. Not that it's about that, but it's it is interesting. The other thing that that sparked with me is this lack of human connection in the world. And I think if people are more self-aware and they spend time with themselves and write down their deepest, you know, we talked about the shadow, didn't we, with Philippe Dinnis, about the shadow being the things that aren't in the physical world, but things that are out there. But actually your mind, your thoughts, you know, you put them from there onto paper, then they become real and they become objective. And like you said, your mind can then kind of work on these problems.
Human connection is going to be even more important with the rise of AI, robotics, and the metaverse. I mean, Apple recently launched the Vision Pro headset, and there are lots of developers looking to build systems, programs, and applications in that world, which means we're going to have avatars connecting with each other in the metaverse space. And this is where I think human connection is going to become even more vital. I mean, it's already lacking today. I mean, we've never been more connected, but we've also felt the most disconnected if you talk to people about feelings of loneliness.
Yeah, and I think I was where my mind was going with it was that we are so unique. The fact that we're alive is a complete miracle.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the sooner we can actually get to the core of who we are, we're gonna have the connections with the humans that we should be having the connections with. If you're pretending to be someone you're not, whether it's driven by ego or whatever it is, yes, you will attract people and you will connect with people, but you might be connected with the wrong people because you're really unique. And it's this thing that keeps coming up. But as the world becomes more removed and disconnected, there is a need. And actually, our young listeners, in fact, any of our listeners, they can start kind of really getting to know themselves because we are unique.
And that's powerful because, like, it's one of the things I'm trying to teach my daughter at the moment is that when we're young, we want to feel part of a group. And when I say group, in many instances, it's your peer group, it's your social circle. But what that involves is becoming less you and more like the average person. But when I think about self-development, self-awareness, the journey really is about understanding who you are and becoming it. And in many cases, as we grow older, part of that is reminding ourselves who we were as children. And you know, in therapy, they call it inner child. And sort of really visiting that inner child and connecting to that inner child, because we are a miracle, but also we are unique by design. And if we can understand what makes us unique, we can tap into that. And so when we read books, go to seminars, listen to success stories, it's not about saying, hey, I want to follow this person's blueprint, because you're never going to get to the same destination following exactly their blueprint, because they did things a certain way because it aligned with who they are. So to give an example, when I did the book launch for Energize, there's lots of different ways that you could do a book launch, and people do it either through webinars, book launch events, book clubs, and so on. For me, I wanted to tap into the part of me that was creative. I'm a very creative person. I like thinking of novel ideas. And so I said, well, what would that launch look like if I was just being me and having fun? And the first thing I did is I sat down, I looked at my network, and I said, well, who could I collaborate with? who on paper doesn't look like an obvious collaboration, but we could bring something unique to the world. And so a couple of things I did during the period of my book launch is, one, I partnered with the Connaught Hotel. They designed a cocktail called Energize. So when you went to the bar and you ordered this cocktail, it would be mixed for you and then presented on a signed copy of my book.
That's so cool.
And we shot the video of the cocktail being made. We shared it on social.
Yeah.
So when the bartender shared it to his audience, I had people from hospitality following my work, and people from my audience went to the bar and experienced the drink. We also did one of the world's first book launches in the metaverse. I partnered with an artist where she put together this original piece of art called Energize, based on my work and my teachings. And this was just me having fun. I mean, this was my creativity in motion. And that was me being me. So I think when we can understand who we are, what makes us feel alive, what gets us going, the next question is, how can we apply that or bring that to the work that we're doing? And that's where what you do becomes different. That's when what you do becomes different. And it's important, because when people say, oh, this industry is too competitive, there's too many people doing this. Yes, but no one doing it in the way you can do it. And that's what I think will resonate with the audience.
And there'll always be naysayers. You know, and I think actually just being in tune with yourself, because I mean, Zan and I talked earlier about you know, the inner critic, and then, you know, the inner guide. And it's almost like, how can you, it's good to question yourself, or question why you're feeling a certain way, or but if you can really get that to the root of who you are, then that will help be your North Star, you know, kind of shape your vision. We've also been talking a lot about lately how, you know, comparison's a thief of joy. And it's much easier to compare yourself to someone that might be 100 steps ahead than 10,000 steps ahead. But even when it comes to, you know, the schoolyard and, you know, young children, you know, young kids in education.
The important thing is, when we think about comparison, it should always be inspiration over comparison. Because for me, there's healthy and unhealthy ways to compare. So first of all,
that's a good distinction, actually.
Yeah. So first of all, we are never going to not be able to compare, because we are surrounded by social media. We're surrounded by reading about stories, seeing stories.
Human nature.
People will tell you about, have you seen this person or that person doing this? And naturally, the first thing that happens is we go into this comparison mindset. But there's healthy and unhealthy ways to compare. Now, the unhealthy way is to become jealous. It's then to, I've got to do this. My life isn't as good as that person. And all that's going to do is make you feel negative and put you through a period of depression. The healthy way of comparison is to, instead of comparing in terms of what you have or don't have versus the other person, is to use the comparison for inspiration. So to look at ways that you can have a healthy relationship with the idea of comparison, you might say things such as, well, what is it they did that helped them to get there? What is it they are doing now that is helping them build a community? And then what's happening is, again, this puts you into this mode of action. You are using their journey, their story, and where they are today as inspiration.
You're being curious. You're actually, it's that
coming from a
curiosity
place of curiosity. So then, I mean, this is what's been really helpful to me when people say, Simon, how have you done well in this area or that area? I said, well, there's a couple of things I do at the beginning. So let's say I want to become a good speaker, and I want to learn how to build a speaking business. I initially thought the way to do that was to sign up to a club like Toastmasters, learn how to speak and go from there. But after the first session, the awareness in my head said to me, Simon, this isn't the right route, because it would never replicate a real world scenario. Because what happens in these sort of clubs is you get the chance to talk to the room. But for me, that's the immediate flaw, because everybody in that room knows who you are. They're your peers, they're your colleagues, they're in the club with you. But in the real world, everyone in that room, they're going to be strangers. Nobody will know who you are. I mean, over time they will, but initially no one's going to know who you are. And so I said to myself, well, if I'm going to accelerate this part of my journey, I've got to do a couple of things here. The first is I've got to put myself into situations where there are complete strangers in the room. So that involved me reaching out to event organizers and saying, hey, I will speak to you for free, your audience for free, if I can grab content from it. it's a win-win. If I'm not good, you haven't paid me anything. If I'm good, the audience will love you.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win situation here. And so that's what I started doing. That became my training. I would put myself into these situations where there were strangers in the room and just talk about things that would be valuable. That really helped me grow, because if it went well, then people wanted to follow your work, and they will kind of reach out for understanding how you can help them. The second was then this curiosity. I would go to seminars and workshops. I would go into YouTube and watch amazing speakers do their thing. But I wasn't always listening for the content, which a lot of people do. So when you listen to a podcast or you hear a speaker present at an event, you're taking lots of notes based on the content they're sharing.
Right.
For me, I was trying to understand the mechanics. So how did they start? How did they end? How many stories did they tell? How did they tell it? Did they come into the audience? Did they involve other people? What were the structures for the stories they shared? So because I was focused on the mechanics and codifying those mechanics, it helped me very quickly to understand what was working and what was not working.
It's really interesting. Just listening to you talk. The negative comparison is comparing yourself to something that's external.
Yeah.
But actually, if you get your strength from inside, that internal strength, you will look at that situation in a very constructive way.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, you break it down. What did they do? I think Picasso, I forget what he said, but in the art world, he was, he copied a lot of ideas, but he made it his. Yeah. So actually, you can take someone's idea or approach, and then and make it better. Yeah. Or a connection that you might have with someone would be different to the connection they have with them. So it's almost like, what can you take and then make it into your own, exactly. to kind of feel your own, success.
Yeah. I mean, I think everything is neutral. Nothing is inherently good or bad. That's my opinion. And there's freedom in that, I think, because then you can choose. In my opinion, everything's narrative. So, I mean, for example, the other day I was trying to talk to my brother. He was putting a new screen on his phone, and it failed the first time, and he's, I can't do it. It doesn't work. I'm like, it's now okay. It's not the fact that I'm not trying to tell you like you're doing it wrong, because when I started talking to him about it, he's like, oh, it's just sometimes I feel stupid. Sometimes I feel like this because of that. I'm like, I want you to try and take away your awareness fully on just the action itself. It's got actually nothing to do with you putting the screen on the phone. It's got nothing to do with that. It's how you're approaching it. And as well, after you do it, it's the words you say, your energy about it, and it's the same thing with even if we're viewing something that it seems there's nothing positive to take from, that's a positive to take from it. The fact that there's nothing there, okay, what would I want to do differently if I was in that situation, or, for example, like that. So I think that's helped me a lot.
I think that's where a lot of our power lies, is that we can't always control what happens to us, but we can always control our response to what happens to us. And that is in our power. And when we understand that, we can become a better creator of our reality. We can bend it towards our favor. There's a word I share in a book called Pronoia, which means the opposite of paranoia. So paranoia is this feeling that many of us may have gone through in life, which is that feeling of somebody or something trying to sabotage your progress. So it could be you're trying to fight for promotion at work, but you feel like there's these forces you don't know that are working against you, that someone is trying to make sure you don't get that promotion. Or it could be the fact you keep failing at something and you say, why is the world against me? Why can't I get it right? And why is this person able to do it and I can't? So this feeling of paranoia, when you feel like the world is out to get you, versus pronoia, which is the opposite. It is this belief that the universe is conspiring in your favor.
I love that.
That life is working for you and not against you. Now, I'm not here to tell listeners to say this is true and that's not true. But what I would challenge listeners to do is just give it a try. Give it a try for the next week, and to see your life through the lens of Pronoia. So when you start seeing life working for you and not against you, you start seeking the lesson. You start seeking the alternative perspective, because there is always another perspective to what has happened. As you said earlier, there's no good or bad, there just is. So when an event happens, let's say a car crashes into a wall, it's not like the wall gets angry and the car gets sad. The event just is. But as humans, because we operate from our mind has to interpret the event in some way.
Yes.
And this is why an event is neutral. Some people will interpret the event as bad, and others will interpret the event as good. And this is why when something happens, it will create opportunities for some and it'll create problems for others. All comes down to how you see it.
How you look at it.
Your thoughts literally create your reality. Your thoughts carry energy.
Right.
And it is what drives you to action. And the superpower we don't appreciate we have is the ability to choose one thought over another. At any moment, you can choose one thought over another. And that literally changes your physiology. So if you think that this is good and this could be an opportunity, suddenly your body feels positive. And your mind sends a signal to the rest of your body that this is an opportunity. So what happens is suddenly you find the energy to show up, to do that thing. But if your thoughts say, I'm not sure this is going to be good, or this isn't going to be worth it, once you accept that as a belief, your entire body aligns to that.
Yeah.
It's great. Let's just chill tonight and watch Netflix.
It's so true. It's so true.
That's powerful stuff. I guess we're coming to an end of our time here, actually. So since the launch of your book, what would be your parting wisdom? So, like, is there any new wisdom that you can impart at this point in your journey? Because obviously we spoke to you before it was launched. What can you bring? What's your parting words of wisdom to our listeners at this point in your journey?
I think, put succinctly, two things. One is to have a bias to action, and two is to publicly share your journey using the tools available to you. Because what I've learned through content such as video, articles, newsletters, is that the only way to find your voice is to use your voice. The more you can use your voice through distributing content, sharing your thoughts, sharing your wisdom, sharing your insights, the more you're going to find what your voice is. Nobody knows ahead of time what their niche is. Whenever you start a business, like, what's my niche? What's my niche? What am I good at? Well, you're never going to know until you put stuff out into the world. And the feedback you get from that is going to tell you what resonates and what doesn't. And that's how you keep refining, is how you keep iterating. There is no perfect first product. When you get a new app launched in the App Store, yes, it's going to be buggy. Yes, it's going to crash a few times. But that's the whole point. They put it out there so they can learn from the feedback. And they refine and then test, and then suddenly it becomes the biggest selling app and everyone's using it. But they would never have got there if they didn't do that first launch. And it's the same with us. You're never going to get to that 25th or 26th video or product or article or post if you don't do that first one. So publicly share, put your voice and insights out into the world, and don't be attached to the outcome.
Yes.
Focus on making the journey an enjoyable one. If you can, see it like a game.
Yes.
Because I think when you approach things with a gamification mindset, you don't really need the rewards, because the game itself is the reward. To stay in the game, playing the game, and getting energy from that game, for me, it's the greatest joy. If I become too attached and wedded to results, what happens is my emotional well-being goes on a roller coaster.
You're always in that failure curve, aren't you? That's really powerful.
Is there anything that you've learned since you put the book out that you would put in it, or in a second version? So
many. I remember, you mentioned Daniel Priestley earlier. I remember when I was first speaking with Daniel, he said to me, and this was before the book came out, he said to me, Simon, the book that would change your life is not the one you read, but the one you write. And I didn't appreciate that comment until my own book came out. And then since the book came out, it's been a hell of a journey in terms of sharing it with the world, speaking on stages across the planet, being involved in opportunities and deals that I probably wouldn't have got involved with, or even seen come into my emails pre the book coming out. And it showed me, if I were to condense that into lessons, that when you do hard things, life becomes easy. But if you do easy things, life becomes hard. And too many of us prefer ease today and problems tomorrow. So if we can do the hard stuff today, which always sounds easier when I say it, but actually it starts with doing the hard thing first thing in the morning. Every day we have the opportunity to decide what is most important to us. So if you can get up, do the hardest thing in the morning, whatever else happens throughout your day, you're going to feel productive.
Right.
And if you can do enough of that in a row, what's going to happen is you're going to be far ahead of the majority in no time.
Right.
Most people don't start the day doing the hardest thing first. They leave it off. Then it becomes tomorrow, next week, next month, if ever. So if you can start doing hard things and making time to do them first thing, your life will become easier.
Amazing.
Wow, that's a great place to wrap up, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, so just really, really quickly, what's to come for Simon?
And where to find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on all the major social media platforms, but the two I'm most active on is LinkedIn and Instagram. Instagram, my handle is at Simon Alexander O. And you can get my book on all the major book websites. Amazon is the obvious one for you, depending where you are located. And in terms of what's next, well, there's one thing through my awareness I've come to focus on, which is just be better than who I was yesterday, and the rewards will come. Because then I'm not attached to the outcome. I'm just open to everything, and I'm focused on continual improvement. And I find that if I can keep doing that on a consistent basis, life has its way of providing some very nice surprises.
Fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that. Thank you so much for doing
Thank you
this.
so
with
much for
us,
having
Simon.
me.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Rocket Pod. When you get a moment, we'd love it if you could jump over to whatever platform you're listening to the podcast on and leave a quick review. Get in touch. We love all your questions and comments. And it just helps us identify more guests like Simon that can really help and inspire you in your daily life. One thing that Simon really made me aware about is how I'm using my energy and how important it is to protect it. Surround yourself with folks that can energize you. And if you do have family members or folks that, you know, maybe long life friends that might be taking that energy away, just limit your time with them.
Yeah, definitely. I have a lot of experience with that too.
You do?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, I think we all focus a little bit too much on all the things, the physical things that we need to do, and time. But, you know, I go back to my spiritual roots of everything is energy. But we never realize that actually managing your energy is the thing that's going to make the needle move way more than everything else, because
You're more focused on the things that matter
yeah.
to you.
And or even just the fact that you can put focus onto things properly. If you don't have energy, you can't have like full focus.
And you can spend more time in the flow, or certainly have more of those moments. Carve out times for yourself to do nothing, because sometimes we need to recenter ourselves. And in our busy lives, it's very hard. There's so much noise out there. We need to kind of create some quiet moments for ourselves to reconnect.
You can't have self-development without self-awareness.
That's very true. I mean,
That's like the simplest thing ever, but
I can relate to that so much.
Yeah,
because you can read all the self-help books in the world, but if you're not actually aware of yourself, you connect with yourself, then it's going to be futile, or just will go in one ear and out the other.
Yeah, and nowadays, you know, there's a lot going on in the world, so it is the perfect time to put our energy towards our own energy.
Yeah, and if we look after ourselves and protect our energy, then we have more to give. Otherwise, we're giving from an empty tank, and that then becomes not authentic. Actually, it's not real. It's a fake, fakery.
It's a fake fakery.
You can't fake energy.
That's true. So yeah, we hope you enjoyed today's episode with Simon Alexander Ong. Thank you so much for tuning in. Follow us along on social media at RocketPod Media. And definitely check out his book. It's linked in the bio. It'll do you the world of good. And I guess we'll see you in the next episode.
Take care.